Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisperer Show. I'm your host, Steve Olenski. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest this week is Oksana Sobol, head of insights for the Clorox company. This week, we're going to talk all about different...
Hold up, Steve. I think we've already done that. I have been a guest on your podcast before, and today I'm here with a little friendly takeover to flip the script and interview you. I think it is high time that your listeners learned about what do you think about marketing? What have you learned from all these guests that you've had on air in a year? What do you think of that?
Okay, I didn't expect this, but sure. A friendly takeover. You're in the driver's seat. It's all yours.
Wonderful. Let's just roll with it. So first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit, who is Steve Olenski and what makes your voice unique?
Wow, that's a great question. So my experience, as I jokingly say, has been as straight as a circle, meaning I've been everywhere from ad agencies to big corporations like Oracle and Prudential. I was at Forbes for 10 years as a contributing writer. And my voice and my uniqueness comes from all those different experiences of getting to do different roles and be real life practical application in the world of marketing and branding and advertising and copywriting and just the whole creative process and just getting to meet and engage and learn from so many leaders and yourself included.
So like you mentioned, Steve, you have several identities. You are a journalist, you are a marketer, you are a podcaster, and you have been hosting CMO Whisperer since September of 2023. You have had dozens of fascinating marketing leaders on that show. What is your takeaway on the most important challenges in marketing currently that you have heard from your guests?
Yeah, well, unsurprisingly, first and foremost will be that little two letters, AI, right? As we're taping this in the middle of April of 2024, AI is very prevalent in every marketer's world. And how to deal and do and treat and engage and live with AI and benefit from AI and not feel intimidated by AI. It is definitely the number one thing for marketers the world over. There's so much that we all don't know, as you well know, how AI is going to impact really everything we do, let alone marketing. That's number one. Number two would be just the role itself. A new study came out that was very encouraging in terms of the average length of the tenure of a CMO has expanded. I think it was Spencer Stewart that came out with the latest research, which showed it's pushing 4 years, I believe the latest number was, for the average tenure of a CMO. So that's always very prevalent among CMOs. Do they have enough runway when they start a role to really show maximum return in enough time that they're given? So that's number two. Number three would be the ever increasing demand, I think is the word, to show the business side of marketing, meaning CEOs and CFOs are asking CMOs more and more to show the bottom line ROI as opposed to the fluffy metrics of, well, I got 50 more LinkedIn followers. What does that mean in dollars and cents? So how are you spending? We're giving you a budget of X amount. What's the return we're seeing based on what we're giving you? And then how, on top of that, how are you incorporating all the latest technologies such as AI in the first place?
You mentioned three important things: AI, tenure of the CMO, which seems like maybe it's expanding, and you have mentioned the desire from management for harder ROI metrics, bottom line metrics. Let's unpack them one by one. AI. How do you feel about AI? And break it down for us. How do you feel as a professional and someone who follows the marketing space very closely? And then how do you feel about it personally as a consumer and as a human being living in this new world?
Great two-part question, and I'll tackle the professional one first. There's an analogy I use that not only can we not see the tip of the iceberg for AI, we can't even see the iceberg, meaning there's so much unknown that how AI is going to impact everything in marketing, from data to customer experience to automation and on and on. We just don't know. And the way I look at AI is I look at AI as a tool that it's yes, it's going to replace some jobs without question. It already is. And I think it's going to replace more. And I think the jobs that it will replace are those who did not really fully grasp AI, do not understand it as a tool, and more looked at it as a threat. And I'll even go so far as to say some who put their head in the sand thinking AI is just going to blow over like another fad. Well, that would be a colossal mistake, because AI is here. AI is changing everything from creative, how fast creative is made. And I'll give you an example that one of my dear friends, Jeff Charney, who's the former CMO of Progressive, he's got a company called Make History, and he recently launched a tool specifically to greatly shorten the amount of time it takes to generate a campaign using AI. And it's an incredible tool. And I know some people, I'm sure some people are very scared of it, whether it's on the agency side, whether it's on the internal side, or both, meaning what is this going to mean for my future as in my current role? Again, if you come at it as a threat, that's not going to serve you well. But if you look at it as a tool, just like any other tool in your toolbox, it's going to greatly help you and embrace it. And ChatGPT is really the lowest hanging fruit right now. There are so many other things you can be using and trying and should be trying when it comes to AI, and how you can do your job, no matter what your job is, better than you currently are. Use ChatGPT. Absolutely use it. Read all about it. Use the prompts. Check out all the different things that it does. But again, that's really just the start of where AI is going to go. And really be diligent about staying on top of all the latest things that are coming when it comes to AI, including what I was saying earlier about Jeff Charney and his Make History tool, and how he's greatly shortening the length of time it takes to do a campaign. So that's professional. Personal, it's a really interesting question. I don't have a crystal ball what it's going to do for our lives. I know it's going to greatly enhance the medical field and give our doctors and medical professionals the capabilities that we never even dreamed of when it comes to our health. I don't know what it's going to mean in terms of our daily lives. I don't know yet. If you remember when IoT came into vogue and everything in our house is going to be connected to the internet, and that's happened to some degree. I don't think it got to the point where we all expected it to, where appliances are connected to the internet. Literally everything's connected to the internet. I think what you're going to see is I don't want to say infiltration because that sounds negative, but AI is going to permeate our daily lives a lot more, whether it's in our car, whether it's in our homes. A lot of things are going to be affected. And I don't mean that as a negative, are going to be directly and greatly affected by AI, and for the better. I truly believe that, for the better.
For the better. Okay, let me ask you a more concrete question about this, because as you said, there's still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things we do not know. A number of your guests spoke about harnessing AI as marketers, and that includes creative, whether it's AI creating campaigns, enhancing campaigns, targeting campaigns. Can you tell when you are being marketed to by an AI? Like, what's your level of confidence when you look at an ad? Is it 50%? Is it 80% that it's been AI made? And how does that make you feel to be on the receiving end of that?
Yeah, it's another great question. You may have to do more of these friendly takeovers.
I am more comfortable in the interviewer seat.
You're a very good interviewer. So I have to admit, I have not, whether I just haven't been open to it, or I have not seen that I think is an AI generated ad, other than those that are put in front of me as an AI generated ad, meaning, hey, I want you to look at this, but it's AI generated, so I know going in, right? So I can't say that an ad that I've seen over the past X number of months has really stuck out to go, wow, that's really bad. That's really impersonal. That's AI driven. You can see that a mile away. I will tell you a quick anecdote. about a friend of mine who's a CMO of a big brand. She had an RFP out for an agency and she got 3 proposals. And she said, Steve, every single one was pretty much exactly the same. That she could tell they plugged in the requirements for the RFP into a chat GPT and spit out a presentation. And it was that obvious.
I believe, it's like that joke. Can you please find all our pitch decks from last year and do a global replacement of blockchain with Gen AI?
Exactly. And she was tremendously offended by it. She's like, I know, I get it. You can use it to some extent, but she was adamant to say that it was so obvious. Like some of them were almost verbatim with one another. That then becomes one of my biggest fears, is that we get too dependent on AI and we get lazy and going, oh, well, I have to write something today. It's a white paper, it's a blog post, it's a script, it's whatever. Or I have to ideate on something. I need 5 ideas on X. I'm just going to plug it into ChatGPT or another AI platform, and whatever it spits out, I'm just going to share verbatim. That is a real fear of mine. And because now you're losing that human touch. That I'm all for using AI and technology to spur and to start and to spark ideas. Absolutely. And you're talking to someone who's, a lot of my career was based on ideation and brainstorming and coming up with ideas and using that part of my brain. I don't ever want to not use that. But I could always use help to spark an idea, to ignite an idea, but I would never, ever just rely solely on something that just spit out from an AI platform.
I'm intrigued by how you're framing that. Hey, if you are using AI thoughtlessly to be lazy, the customer will see it. Whether the customer is a consumer or in B2B context, they will see it and they will penalize you for it. So kind of the market in essence will take care of those misuses. I also want to go back to what you said about the number 2 thing you have noticed as trending in the world of CMOs right now, and that is that the tenure seems to be expanding. You've said a number of times in your podcast that this is one of the shortest C-suite tenures. Now you're saying maybe it's going from 3 years to 4 years. I'm curious what's driving that, and also as part of it, you have spoken to people who rose to the highest ranks in the marketing field. What traits do these successful people have in common? And is that a factor in extending the tenure of the CMO?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I'll kind of stick to the top 3 just for brevity's sake. Number 1 is you have to, and these aren't really in any specific order, you have to be open to acknowledging that you know what you don't know. Now, I think this applies to everybody in life, but since we're speaking in the context of CMOs, and how fast the world of marketing is changing in the digital world and AI, everything is on supersonic speed. You have to be willing to accept and acknowledge that you don't know everything. And having said that, your ego cannot get in the way of just thinking, I know everything. I know what's best. You can give me your input, but at the end of the day, it's my decision. Well, it is your decision. But your decision should be based on what those around you are telling you, because theoretically, they all have different roles that support your high-level CMO role. So you need to be really reliant and dependent, and that's a really strong word for someone who has, shall we say, a fragile ego. When you have to depend on someone else to help you do your job, there's nothing wrong with that. But far too many leaders have that ego stroke and don't let other people's opinions have any merit of value. So you have to know what you don't know. That's number 1. Number 2 is you have to be able to have leadership capabilities. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's empathy, number 1. You have to be empathetic. You have to be compassionate. You cannot just be this robot that just lets people come and go and into your life and just treat them as numbers, as the old saying goes. So you have to have that sense of empathy, be human, right? What a novel idea. I'm laughing because I know every type of CMO and every type of leader, and unfortunately, I know enough robotic leaders. You have to have empathy. You have to have sympathy. You have to have compassion. Doesn't mean you're weak. See, that's a big problem. I think far too many leaders equate those personality traits to a weakness, which blows my mind because to me it's the complete opposite. Those are strengths. When you show your human side, you endear yourself to those around you, and then you build that trust. Okay, and then number three, it's got to come down to that four-letter word that is ever since the word big data came into vogue is data, right? Data, and I'm not just saying this because who I'm speaking to, the head of insights, who lives by data, but data, there's picking it, the facts don't lie, the numbers don't lie, the data is the lifeblood. Pick a term, it doesn't matter because one side you have the human side, the empathy side, the compassion. The other side you have the data. You have to marry the two, and you cannot have one without the other. So you can't market based on intuition. You can't market based on emotion. But the flip side is you cannot market just based on data either. And I see far too many marketers going one way or the other. That's a big problem. That's a recipe for disaster. So data is absolutely number three, again, in no specific order, but you have to be able to not only look at data, look at the right data, and what it's telling you is what it's telling you, meaning it may not tell you what you want to hear, but data does not lie. And that's a huge kind of like, well, wait a minute. If we can twist the data to mean that, no, no. So those are my three biggest things right now.
What I find interesting about those three things, Steve, so you said, be humble about what you do not know. And maybe at this time we have a lot of unknowns. You talked about leadership capabilities and especially empathy as part of that. And then data, and data seems to be eating the world right now. What I find interesting about that is that they seem kind of fairly point in time characteristics. So new things are being required of CMOs and marketing leaders. You have been in the industry for a very long time. How are the traits that make these people successful today different from how you would have answered this question decades ago when you were interviewing them for Forbes? What's different and unique now? Or is it really just there are some common themes?
The first thing, the empathy, the human side is always there, right? Mm-hmm. The data side clearly has not always been there. Pre-digital, I know, right? Of course, there's never been this big influx of data. So that would be like the first compare and contrast. Just the idea of having so much knowledge on a given person, and it's growing every second, as you know, how much data is generated. I could even possibly fathom how much data is generated literally every second, guys, compared to 20 years ago. So just that sheer amount and the sheer volume of data, plus in the advent of the digital age, things change so fast. And you cannot ever think, I have a line like, you can never check the box that, okay, I know everything there is to know about marketing. If I ever meet anybody who tells me that, I run the other way because there is no such person, because things are constantly changing. The consumer is constantly changing. The platforms that they're on are constantly changing. The generations as they come up, Gen Y versus Gen Z versus boomers, they're constantly changing. Even within a demographic is constantly changing. The world changes so quickly as opposed to 20 years ago. And I cannot imagine what it will be like in 5 to 10 years, let alone 20 years from now, how fast things are going to change. So compare and contrast, to get back to your question, 20 years ago, much slower pace, much more deliberate, if you will. Maybe it was quote unquote easier to market to someone because there were not all these additional channels and options for consumers. Those days are gone. They will never come back. And you have to be able to acknowledge that what I know today could very well change tomorrow.
Yes, things that are easier in hindsight, yes. So 5 years from now,
Right.
We might be looking back at today and thinking, oh, if we only knew what's coming.
Exactly.
Speaking of what's coming, and you have also alluded to the change of generations in consumers, but the change of generations in marketers. So I'm thinking of this as COVID was that watershed moment that changed the trajectory, the career trajectory of a lot of young professionals who were still in college, just leaving college, just starting in the workplace. Their experience was very different starting at that time from anyone who came before or after. What advice would you give to someone who is in early stages of their marketing career right now? What will it take for them to succeed in this environment?
First and foremost, get a mentor. Find someone who's done it, is doing it at least 10 years kind of thing. Find someone that you can learn from and understand where marketing came from. Because if you don't understand where it came from, you're really going to have a hard time know where it's going. And I know that may sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but whatever the adage is of those who forget history are doomed to repeat it or something like that, it's akin to that. Meaning you should really understand and appreciate the history of marketing and how we market to consumers and buyers versus then to now. Because by not understanding where we've come from, I really don't think how you can be successful going forward, because of you need to have that appreciation, that historical perspective on what people have gone through, right? That sounds kind of negative, but what not only when I say people, I meant on both sides, marketers and consumers, to where we are now to where we're going to be. So really, number one is get a mentor. Number two is learn the history of marketing. Hopefully, I don't know this. Hopefully, at the university level, it is being taught the kind of the history of where we've come from when it comes to marketing and advertising and branding and communications and content and on and on and on. So get a mentor, really understand and learn the history of marketing. And number three, which may sound incredibly obvious, but really, really stay on top of, like, one eye on now, one eye on the future, right? I think there's this kind of perception that if you're of a certain age, under say like 30, well, you must know about TikTok because you're under 30 kind of thing. While I don't necessarily agree with that, for one, because I use TikTok, but I think there's this perception of a younger demographic that you are always on top of the latest trend. So whatever the latest tool comes out, whatever the latest platform comes out, go on it and try it, but look at it through the lens of a marketer as opposed to just your personal life, right? Like, when Snap came out, a lot of people went on Snap. Of course. Well, any platform that comes out, a brand is going to want to know how to maximize and capitalize on it. I guarantee you. So the more that you can become adept at any new platform that comes out, the more valuable you are going to be. So go on the latest platforms, kick their tires, but do so through the lens of a marketer, as a brand trying to market to a given consumer or buyer.
It's kind of like you're wearing that professional hat in all aspects of your life, because as a marketer, you connect with people every moment of their day. So you've got to build that muscle to look at the world simultaneously as a consumer, but also as a marketer. I have a lot of sympathy for young people who are entering the field because their educational experience has been disrupted and their workforce experience is also different. So much learning at that early stage happens through osmosis. You are among people, whether that's in an office environment or some other kind of environment, and you're learning and absorbing from a multitude of people. But I do wonder what that learning looks like when you are on screen predominantly, and now you have your manager instead of having a village to learn from. Do you have any thoughts on that, kind of how this Zoom environment is changing interactions in marketing for younger people, but
Yeah,
everyone involved?
I do. It's a great topic, and it's almost if I put you up to ask me this, which I did not, but it is such a soapbox issue of mine. I have such a fear that we are losing the ability to do what you and I are doing right now, which is hold a conversation without texting or emailing or using instant messaging or whatever the case may be. It is an absolute fear of mine. And I know I sound like the old man, get off my lawn, when I say, like, it's my fears are very rooted in the younger generation. And part of it is because I have younger kids. I have a 19-year-old son and a 24-year-old daughter. Fortunately, they're able to hold conversations and engage in conversations. I don't know, and it's nothing I did. It's probably just osmosis because I do this for a living. But I have a real fear of not being able to hold a conversation with another person, right? And now, especially now with the AI elephant in the room, it's even more scary. And I don't know what the answer is, but back to your original question, in the age of Zoom, juxtaposed over top of the age of mobile and texting and instant messaging, it is a real fear that the younger generation and those coming behind them will not be able to do literally what you and I are doing as we speak, which is just engage in now what I refer to as an old school conversation of just two people talking. And again, I part of me wants to just literally get up on a soapbox and preach it and help teach people how to engage and converse. And who knows, maybe that's what I'll be doing, right? To do. And again, I always tell people, I don't expect you to be me because I do this very naturally and can hold conversations. But I just want people to be aware of the fact that as great as technology is, and I'm not that curmudgeon, I swear to you, I'm not, but I don't get too reliant, don't get too dependent where you literally can't, like, think about someone like on a dating app, having a conversation, or someone asking someone else out for a date. Can they do that verbally? Can they sit in a job interview and engage in a prospective employer without texting their answer? That sounds crazy, right? But is it?
It is changing. It is changing how the conversations are shaping, and we forget. I think that your ability to communicate your idea is more important than your idea, and is that a skill that is beginning to atrophy and not being built up enough for those who still need to learn it. So speaking of communicating ideas and having conversations, journalism. This is
Hmm.
another field we hear so much about, how it is being affected with technology and societal changes, and how we have conversations these days. What are your thoughts? You have been a successful journalist in the time of printed magazines, when you met your interview subjects face to face, and now you live in a world where you're a podcaster and so many things are done remotely, and just the shape of those conversations is very different. Can you contrast for us then and now, which of those changes are good changes and which maybe not so much?
Yeah, boy, that's another good question. You're really good. So when I started at Forbes, it was printed slash digital. Most of my conversations were either done, and I say conversations, interviews were either done in person or on a phone, meaning audio only, no video. So again, that was really reliant on just the ability to converse and communicate, to your point, your question in a plausible and understandable way, right? As opposed to now, where you can do conversations this way, meaning what you and I are doing on video and on Zoom, on any other video type platform. So when I started, it was extremely reliant on the ability to just have conversations and without seeing the other person. And that's a different type of conversation, meaning you're not seeing the person, you're not seeing body language. So you don't really know how your questions are being received and perceived, which is a big, big, big deal when it comes to journalism. Now you have the ability to literally and figuratively see, understand, even if it's video, how they're responding, what their body language is saying. And a good writer and a good journalist will always be able to feel that. Now they can see that as well. So that's a big, big difference between then versus now.
That is not what I expected, I'll say, because for some reason I thought that back then you would meet face to face predominantly, but you're making a very good point that actually probably the majority of the conversations took place by phone. And so what
Mhm.
we have now is actually an improvement. So keeping that in mind, what about the output? What is different about when you read how people write today or how people podcast today compared to a few decades ago? What strikes you as the aspect of reporting that has undergone the most change?
Yeah, I think unfortunately what's undergone the most change when it comes to just journalism in general, there's two things. On one, unfortunately, but there's been a proliferation of a lot of new quote unquote media outlets, which to me is one of the downsides of the internet, meaning anybody can just hang a shingle and say they're a media outlet or they're a publisher. And they're really not. And some of them have nefarious reasons for doing it, whether they're political, personal, or whatever. So the downside is the proliferation of a lot of new, I'll just use the word again, outlets that they're really not true media outlets. The second thing is, and this is unfortunately political, but when the former president's press secretary used the term alternative facts, and that then took on a life of itself. And it kind of opened the floodgates for these same so called media outlets to basically carte blanche to say whatever they want. And where facts became almost irrelevant. And let me loop it all back to the point about data, where if you have a data point to juxtapose it over what these quote media outlets do now, they'll twist the data point into something else. Or they'll make up a whole new number and say, is this an alternative fact? Because they can. And unfortunately, too much of the public, and I don't just say American public, it's just the public at large, don't now know the difference between truth and false, right? And the lines have blurred. And even unfortunately, the lines have blurred among what were once very prestigious publications, which I won't name, but unfortunately, those lines have blurred even among those. And when that happened, things really got cloudy. And now you're not sure, where do I go? Who do I turn to get the most unbiased reporting? And I think that's what's happened is in the world at large, again, not just America, everywhere. Where do you go? Who do you trust for that single source of truth?
You have put your finger on such a societal pain point right now, I think. So, historically, media emerged as almost a fourth branch of governance, an independent force that was another check and balance on the other three. But I think what you have highlighted is that a lot of the outlets are actually existing in service of an agenda right now. So it's the opposite of bringing an independent, unbiased, balanced point of view and informing about affairs. It's the opposite of that. It's driving a very specific agenda, and that is a concerning dynamic.
And I think it's worth noting what we're talking about is not just, I think some people could hear what we're saying thinking we're only talking in the political world. I'm not. Like this permeates everything, including the world of marketing, where facts become irrelevant. And I don't think you have to look far to see examples of that, of where the world of marketing, the world of advertising and branding, because there's that agenda that you just referenced, which is a perfect word, and it's not even hidden per se. People have an agenda, and they'll create that narrative to fit that agenda. Facts are irrelevant. So I just wanted to make sure everybody listening to this that we're not just talking about the world of politics when it comes to false narratives and alternate facts.
It is that abundance of data that you have alluded to at the beginning. It's like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you would think there's more data and more facts than ever. You should be able to get to the right point of view on issue. But then because there is so much, it also becomes easy to fragment and present a certain angle to it. And how do you feel about where things are going? Do you see this as an issue of erosion of trust in society in a bigger picture? Now we're tying marketing and journalism and society into some common thread. And Steve's take on it.
Yeah, no, I think there is definitely an erosion of trust across, unfortunately, everything. Not to put it all under one umbrella, but you can look at studies where consumers don't trust marketing. Okay, consumers don't trust brands, but then when you take it up a couple levels, where consumers don't trust, elected leaders, right? And I think the common denominator is that word trust. And once that kind of seeps in, that erosion of trust, then I think it just permeates into so many other things above and beyond just the quote unquote real world things, meaning marketing. Not that it's not real world, but it's not our day-to-day life per se for most people. So in the political spectrum and where laws are being done and governances are happening and things like that, those are real world. And when trust permeates into that, or distrust, I mean, and it's a short ride to, it's going to permeate into other things in our life, and including the world of marketing, which you and I live in. And that then becomes very problematic, because once that level of mistrust and distrust comes up, it's really hard to change someone's mind because of that, what I said earlier, that proliferation of so many different outlets who are telling you one thing where another one's telling you another. And then what happens is, I think so many people just get, and myself included, where you get overwhelmed and you literally don't know who to trust, whether it becomes politics, whether it becomes marketing. No matter what it is you're reading, you start to question, what am I reading? What am I listening to? What am I hearing? And how do I know there's truth behind it? That's a pretty scary proposition.
Trust is hard won, but easily lost. And does that make it the new currency? To end on a somewhat more optimistic note, what are you watching as a potentially exciting developments in the marketing field? What are you paying attention to, whether it's trends or how people are trying something different that gives you optimism and wakes up your curiosity, something that you want to follow over the next year, maybe?
Yeah, I think one of the things is I'm seeing a lot more brands create loyalty type programs. And I get it. On one hand, I understand the reason why is because of the pending Google third-party cookie deprecation, right? Meaning smart brands are understanding, I got to start capturing first-party data, because I'm going to run out of the ability to cookie someone very soon through Google. Okay. But on the other hand, I like the fact that brands are taking the initiative to want to reward, literally and figuratively, consumers for their loyalty. So I am encouraged by that. Again, knowing both sides of that coin, but most consumers don't, and that's okay if they don't. The more I think a brand can reward, it doesn't necessarily have to be money, reward a consumer for their loyalty, I think that's a good thing.
Trust and loyalty. You heard it here, the future of marketing. Steve, thank you so much for playing along and swapping seats. Everyone can look forward to seeing you in your usual capacity of the interviewer next week. How was this for you? How does it feel to be in the hot seat?
And people are going to think we set this up. I did not. I came on the interview because you were already on. I wanted to do part two. And I just, quote, played along. If you know Oksana, she didn't really give me a choice, but in a good way. And she's such a brilliant interviewer.
I think it was time that we heard from you. You have a lot to add on the subjects that you are interviewing people on.
I appreciate that. And I had a blast. Any other time you want to do a friendly takeover, I will gladly take off and go to the beach and let you be my guest host, because you're really good at it. I had a really great time, and I want to thank you.
And thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, which is a little bit different from the rest of them. And I look forward, Steve, to more interesting guests and more interesting thoughts from you and from your guests.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends. And if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.